The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds.
Welcome to Sarah's Country. However you are watching or listening to the show tonight on your Tuesday, it's a real privilege to be fastest growing primetime rural TV and radio show. Hey look, if I don't claim it, then no one else is going to for me. But no, of course, we are seriously enjoying the uptake every single night across 10 plus platforms and of course on demand. So we're here with you 7 p.m. every night, Monday through Thursday. If you're new to Sarah's Country, I say welcome. If you've got us up on your big screen TV, go you, or Bluetooth, of course, maybe potentially on podcast in your vehicle as you're obviously working, travelling around and into the future, hopefully a longer road trip. It is a privilege. I certainly love the momentum we're building around this show, which is all about, of course, the matters that matter most to New Zealand's food and fibre producers. Wow, what a blustery cold front that's ripped through the country. There was a little bit of hail out there, Joel tells me, and it's bringing with it its bite. You know, you forget how feisty she is. You know, she knocks you around a bit when you're not ready for her, the old ice queen. I love winter, though. I really do. I actually love when we have very distinguished seasons in New Zealand. You know, it was far more prominent, I remember, as a kid growing up in the hotness and coldness of central Otago. It seems to every season's kind of getting a little bit milder. So, you know, do you like winter? I really want to know tonight. We're going to be discussing all the great things about winter. It's not all that bad. You know, there's some yummy things about winter. So let's celebrate it in the comments below. I really would love to see that you're here, that you're live with me, and get those thumbs working. You know, things like hearty soups and open fires, you know, sip of port. I mean, who drinks port in summer anyway? It's the good things about winter. I want you to get very active in these comments. And, of course, or if you're dipping in and out of the live stream, obviously making your dinner, that's wonderful. And thanks so much for joining us. So, we have a very environmental lens to tonight's show to celebrate the good work that Kiwi land custodians, our farmers and our growers are doing on the land. And it was just lovely following on from Mark and Felicity Bro, the Waikato Balanced Farm Environment Award winners we had on last night. I loved their messages. But it is also important that we don't take our foot off the pedal to be the world's best environmentally friendly food and fibre producers in this economic situation we've found ourselves post-COVID. So, tonight on Sarah's Country, after 7:20, we learn how the lockdown has not stopped Central Plains Water, ensuring farmer shareholders' environmental management is audited. We discuss innovation with drones and how the scheme has been is seeing good aquifer recharge across the Canterbury Plains, and also how a great harvest in Canterbury can be attributed to this irrigation, and that's with General Manager Mark Pizey. The Climate Change Commission has asked to review New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions targets, in particular methane, and farmer groups are urging it to make sure this is the Commission, urging the Commission to make sure that it's fair and appropriate and of course in line with developing science. So we're joined after 7:30 by Beef and Lamb New Zealand Environmental Policy Manager, Corina Jordan. And towards the end of the show, a distinguished man of science, of course, is Sir Peter Gluckman. He's a former chief science advisor and joins us with his opinions on how to get more value out of the agricultural sector, but make it more efficient. And that is the challenge ahead, of course, with long-standing issues around land use, water and environment and soil quality becoming, of course, even more important. But to kick off the show, it is one of a sad note. Today, the news of the cancellation of the New Zealand Agricultural Show, the Canterbury Show, as we formerly know it. It's pulled pin on this year's event, and that is the first time since World War II. It is at jeopardy, we note, and it was, of course, probably a huge experience to go through to have to pull the iconic event. So we will be joined shortly by the event director, Geoff Bone, as we hear the words of help first from this year's President, Chris Herbert.
This is Sarah's Country.
Hello,
For those of you that don't know me, I am Chris Herbert, President of the largest community event in our country, the New Zealand Agricultural Show. Thank you for your time, thank you for listening, and thank you for everything that you have contributed towards the show to date. You have helped to make the show what it is, and it is wholeheartedly appreciated. Today, it is with great sadness, and for the first time since World War II, I must announce on behalf of the members of the Canterbury A P Association that the New Zealand Agricultural Show will not go ahead in 2020. With over 500 volunteers and 2,500 individual competitions ranging from rural sport to equestrian to business awards, the New Zealand Agricultural Show is a symbol of what community of volunteers mixed with a commercial arm of employees can achieve together in good times and in bad. The Canterbury A P Association is community owned by its members, and this community now sits at a crossroads. If we continue preparing for a major event in November that may or may not be able to proceed, we face a grim reality of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars that we may never be able to recoup. Our first objective as a charity is to keep our supportive members, volunteers and trade exhibitors engaged, so momentum is not lost for future generations and the show can thrive once again. The second objective is to ensure we remain solvent and to not put ourselves in a situation where we will potentially become bankrupt, losing over 158 years of history and a valued community in the process. It is important to the Canterbury A P Association and its members that it returns any money back to business that has been invested in the 2020 show. With that in mind, all sponsors and trade exhibitors that have paid deposits for 2020 will receive their money back in full or be given the option to donate their deposits to support the show in 2021. Both trade exhibitors and sponsors will be given the chance to participate in the Show Saviour program to ensure we can kick off again next year. The Canterbury A P Association did have a rainy day fund, but those savings have been utilised over the past 6 months, preparing for the November show, which will now not occur. The association has taken steps over the past few weeks to significantly reduce the overheads, sadly reducing staff numbers by 75% and scaling back to a much smaller organisation as it waits out the current environment. Due to our one source of revenue not being available to us in 2020, without your support, we cannot guarantee having the financial resources to start again in 2021. The future of the show is at significant risk. Therefore, we are building a relaunch fund so we can continue to provide a platform for our community to activate, bringing together rural and urban New Zealand and to put on the fantastic community event steeped with history that is so pivotal in Canterbury's spring calendar. I ask you on behalf of our committed team, our association and our members and the people of our community to please consider a donation and become a show saviour. No matter how big or how small your donation could help us to save the show. You can find further information on donating at our website, theshow.co.nz, or by simply calling our main phone number. Thank you for listening, thank you for your support over the years, and thank you for considering our request. We will speak soon, of that I am sure. Goodbye.
Enjoying your comments coming in below. I have a new system. I know many of you may be frustrated if your questions aren't answered, but obviously across 10 different platforms live, it does get quite interesting. You know, I've still got to interview people live as well, you know. But I've got Megan here in the UK and she's keeping me abreast of all the comments now, so I am seeing them all in one place, which is great. Thank you, Megan. Briar says, prefer a darn good autumn as we can get so much done before the weather packs up. Love the warm days and cool nights. I am, of course, a fan of autumn as well. And of course, we're talking about this because I want to pull out the good things about winter It doesn't sound like there is, but I think so many great things. I'm a snowboarder, so I can't wait as soon as it gets cold. And you see that gloomy clouds rolling around, of course, the Southern Alps, and you get quite excited and pull the board out in anticipation. What do you love about winter? Is it the hearty food? Is it shifting brakes? No, I'm just joking. No, I want to know in the comments below and celebrate. And of course, let us know where you're watching around the country and of course around the world. We do have a global audience here on Sarah's Country. Now, new thinking in agriculture came to the people of New Zealand. Did you know this? In May 3rd, 1820. 200 years ago this week was the first plough was used to break ground for wheat in the Bay of Islands. 157 years ago, the Canterbury Agricultural and Pastoral Association was founded in 1863 on a showground of 14 acres in Sydenham in Christchurch. And sadly, in May 2020, with financial uncertainty, the New Zealand Agricultural Show, as it's now known, has been canned for this year. And for the first time since World War II, prompted by the risk, of course, of bankruptcy. It would not have been an easy decision, I know, from my years in event management, and then, of course, to go out to the public today asking for financial support, as we just saw there from Chris Herbert through the Show's Saviour campaign. After what I'm sure has been a rough day, Geoff Bone joins us now to discuss this monumental decision. Geoff, can you talk us through the situation the show has found itself in, firstly? And of course, I know many people will be wanting to know why you would cancel so far out from November.
Well, thank you for having me on, Sarah. Well, I think the first thing to note is the governance of the Canterbury A P Association has been solid for a long time. We had almost $500,000 rainy day fund set aside that hasn't been touched for years because we knew we would need it one day. What's happened this year, though, is that we've gotten to halfway through the year and we rely on the income that we get in our November show. But we can't guarantee that that show's going to go ahead. And what that means for us is that if we cancel today, we can pay all our bills and be solvent. But if we wait until October and it's forced upon us by government, then we may not be able to do that. And so the prudent thing to do to protect the association, given the uncertainty of COVID, is to not run the show this year and then to set ourselves up to relaunch and run again next year, which we can because we're taking this decision early.
So we talked, the campaign is called Show Saviours. I mean, I know personally there is a lot of emotion and passion connected from so many people that absolutely love the show. And the thought of it not being a part of our November calendar is just strange. It's just like, who thought that we wouldn't have Women's Day next week in Burger King? It's just a fixture of New Zealand. And so do you believe that there is enough passion there to rebuild those reserves and see the show through in November 2021?
Well, the outpouring that I've experienced today has been extraordinary. So the answer to that is yes, absolutely. Like, I think that I know our members will get in behind us. I know the wider community is. I've seen it on our, we've got a donation page on the show.co.nz that has been going crazy all day. I know that Christchurch City Council and government are looking to support us, but they needed us to make the tough decisions first and ensure that we act in the best interest of all of the community. I guess the other part of this for us is that moral hazard of running such a large event with so much uncertainty and what that may do to the economy if, for example, a cluster were to occur at the show.
Oh, well, you dealt with M. bovis last year, Geoff, and it's just really throwing things at you. What about
M. bovis was the dealing with that was just a testament to that committee of cattle, those volunteers and the cattle people themselves. I mean, we were there to enable them, but that community brought that together, and the same will follow through for the show over the next couple of years. And
can I send a message out in a support that to drum up some ideas? Anna and Brent Fisher of Silverstream Charolais, they love going and pinching red ribbons from the Canterbury A P Show every year.
They do.
Yeah.
They're wonderful people.
And they've put a ball up for the Silverstream Charolais sale donated to the Canterbury Show. So, there's a lot of creative ways you must be seeing, Geoff.
Yeah, and that really heartens us. I know I've done a lot of work with Anna and her team, and they give not only here and now with the ball, but with their time and their commitment to the show. And they are symbolic of thousands of people that do the same. And so it's wonderful to be, and it's honourable. Sorry, I guess it's humbling to be a part of that community and to lead that community.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what is some of the ways that potentially there could be a scale back show? Was some of those options considered for 2020?
Yeah, look, they still are in some ways. I mean, we run that Young Auctioneers competition, for example. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't recreate that in a safe environment. The issue we've got is the scale. So we really can't generate an event of scale where we have 2,500 competitions and we have 100,000 people through the gate. It's just a cost associated with time, people, organising it over a 6-month period, and then the physical costs themselves of toilets, rubbish, and all of those things that we need to manage at an event. So a volunteer-driven organisation like the Canterbury A P Association will almost certainly come up with creative ways to activate and maintain their community. It'll just be different.
Yeah, I mean, have you, the New Zealand Cup and Show Committee, which is wider than, of course, the Agricultural Show Committee, I mean, what's happening there, of course, with Cup Day being tied in, are they as uncertain across the entire week? That is a tourism factor for Canterbury.
The key players in that are Addington, Riccarton Raceway and Christchurch NZ in the show. Christchurch NZ are very supportive of us, and we are working with them on alternative solutions to help activate the week if there are things we can do during that week. We won't know that until a month before. But I know that both Addington and Riccarton are working towards holding their races, as they always have. Whether they can have a crowd or not is to be determined, and I guess it's for them to decide how they'll run. But I think there's enough history and strength in their organisations and ours that we'll all come through this and everyone will succeed in the end.
I have to ask the question, Geoff. It's not so much the risk of the government sort of putting us back into lockdown towards the end of the year. Is it really the writing on the wall of the economic spiral that we're in, that the money won't be there for exhibitors to help underpin the costs of the event and sponsors?
No, there's plenty of money there. We had a huge uptake of trade exhibitors booking for the site. The financial model works for the show, and it has a future. The issue we had this year was the risk being compounded by COVID, put simply. And where we had a risk that in October we were going to be cancelled, we would have lost significantly more than if we cancelled today. And that's that difference between what we lose today and what we lose in October that is the reason that we are doing the prudent thing and making sure we can live to fight another day.
Does it upset you when people say, well, a lot of these sort of epidemic response committees, etc., are saying that, viable small businesses going into COVID should have been fine? I mean, is COVID actually a real reason that it has affected large-scale events from being able to be viable if they were viable prior?
The event industry in New Zealand has turned off entirely. There is nothing there. All revenue is gone. It's arrived in A&E, not breathing, and there's a no resuscitation order on it at the moment. Look, and that's the reality of events in New Zealand. You would be fairly crazy to be putting money into events given the risks that you're currently facing. But I know in Christchurch, there's some very strong event companies. I mean, the Beer Fest and the Wine Fest that all exist in Hackney Park, for example, I mean, they are run by an incredibly efficient organisation who will really be challenged as we speak. And then all of the marquee providers and the catering providers and the toilet providers, these businesses have been working with me for almost a decade. They're great, amazing businesses, and their revenue's gone.
Oh, it just breaks my heart, Geoff, and I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening will be thinking the same. So, of course, how can people donate and support to make sure that this isn't the end of the New Zealand Agricultural Show forever?
theshow.co.nz.
And then click on donate.
It'll take you straight there. You'll see it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Geoff, for taking the time to join us tonight after what would have been a very full-on day. And I'm sure we'll catch up really soon.
Right, no problem, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, going to the comments, of course, a trusty old viewer you can always rely on, Tony Watson. He said, when we were farming in Southland, an old-timer reminded me the colder the climate, the warmer the people. Oh, I know someone from a cold climate who's a nice, warm person who we'll talk to very shortly to get an idea around that. If you were watching it, actually, Tony, you'll like what I'm just about to play you too. If you were watching last night, there is, of course, a new project aimed at heightening awareness of farm safety. Plant a Seed for Safety was launched hoping to reverse the trend of agricultural's high fatality rate by spotlighting women who have made a difference. And now, as we go to get our next guest on the line, we're discussing the environmental improvement of irrigation and how drones are spying on farmers for the right reasons. But first, here's some key takeaway home messages from our agricultural health and safety leaders on 9 tips to improve your team's culture towards health and safety, brought to you by Safer Farms. This is Sarah's Country.
I think the frustration our shareholders face is they see safety as something separate and a task they need to do at the expense of other tasks. Again, I think the opportunity is to ingrain safety in part of good farming. I mean, if you manage safety, health and well-being on your farm well, I would argue you're managing your stock well, you're managing your pasture well, and you're managing your farm outcomes well. So it really is an and, it's not an or.
We are focused on the business is around our health and well-being, so looking at hours of work, rosters of work, the things that keep people in a good mental health space so they're making better decisions on farm and they're not fatigued and they're not taking risks.
To bring everyone up to speed, we initiated a target of 1 near miss per farm per week, and that just had a exponential increase beyond our imagination really, so it got everyone on board pretty quickly. It also enabled for us to prioritise the higher risks and focus on those and address those.
We're using quite simple apps. We use OnSide and we use Google Forms, and we just developed the WorkSafe toolbox meeting into a form. It can be filled out on someone's phone, and we've got a record of it all on a nice little Excel sheet. It's good for our size business.
So our expectations is for our people to behave safely wherever they are, whether that be in a store or on a farm. And they have a mandate to take the steps they need to take to make sure they are safe. Definitely they're safe, but ideally anyone they're around is safe.
When someone comes onto the farm, there's an electronic sign-in. Everyone on the farm gets a text when they come on farm, and if they haven't signed out by 6 o'clock that night, there's an alert to everyone on farm to check up. Also, the alert system applies to our near misses, our hazards, our safety conversations, so everyone on farm gets an alert when that's entered into the system.
The thing that we really focused on from Harbour is collecting good information, getting good reporting happening on farm, and then using that reporting to mine that for good information to manage critical risks in the business.
We have Midland Contracting, who are the fertiliser spreaders for dairy holdings in Canterbury. Part of their process is they can also use that system, and that initiates a response direct to the farm and the farm supervisor, and there's an incentive there that for hazards that aren't addressed there's a $2 surcharge per hectare, which also is a financial incentive to address hazards sooner rather than letting them leave to a later date.
For me to seek a better outcome, I've got to ask myself, what have I got to do to get that outcome? So the quote I use is, for things to change, I must change. So what do I personally have to do differently to get a better outcome, in this case, in the case of health, safety and well-being?
There's a lovely suggestion come in here from Michael Ross. You know, for all of those who are going to the show, why not make a contribution equal to the gate fee? What a wonderful idea. So go to theshow.co.nz/donate and to be able to contribute at least something to be able to ensure that the Canterbury A P Show, now known as the New Zealand Agricultural Show, is not gone into the history books forever. Winter isn't all pretty, I know. Shifting brakes in Southland in a southerly, fixing frozen pipes in water troughs at negative temperatures, or God forbid, snow, meaning schools are closed and you're back to that COVID homeschooling that you love so much. Joel, now you're from Northern Ireland and I've Googled it. It's fairly close to a pole, 55 degree north on the latitude machine, and I thought I knew what cold was, because Cromwell, where our family farm, was bang on 45 degrees south. So, I mean, what would one of the coldest memories that you would have?
The coldest memory was probably in the Highlands. I was out camping in December for some unknown reason, and the tent we'd borrowed, the zip didn't work on the outside. And it was me and my mate, and we ended up spooning all night just to get through it.
There's a movie about that.
Something about a mountain, yeah.
Yeah, two men spooning.
Yeah.
No, I woke up on a couch and forgot to shut the door, similar to that in Invercargill in July. That was the coldest memory I think I've ever had. Now, it's been a great harvest, I am told, in Canterbury this year, and the development of irrigation has been hailed as a major contributor for underpinning those outstanding yields in face of a dry season. So I wanted to cross now to the new General Manager, well, new-ish, for the Central Plains Water Scheme, established in 2003 to create a 60,000 hectare $450 million community irrigation scheme here on the Canterbury Plains. Now, Mark, firstly, before we talk water, we're talking, of course, this cold, bitterly change we've had today across the country and the shock of winter arriving. What's your favourite thing about winter?
Winter? Well, winter would be snow. I think snow is a beautiful thing.
Obviously.
Possibly not for the same reason as you.
Yeah, I'm saying you like getting the old sort of flash tracksuit out and hitting the slopes at Mount Hutt?
Well, no, I'm well past that now, but every bit of snow that falls is water for me in November and December, and storage is just fantastic.
Absolutely. There's nothing like a good tarn on the mountain to hold that water through for us for summer. I've reached out to Mark after a friend of mine farming in Canterbury recommended this is a good news story about how CPW are continuing to ensure environmental standards are met with auditing continuing over lockdown, with, of course, the innovation of using drones. Mark, can you explain for our audience that don't know much about the scheme what farm environment plans are and why farmer shareholders need to abide by them to be in this scheme?
So a condition that all our shareholders have to fulfill is that they complete a farm environmental plan which sets out how they will manage the impacts of irrigation on their farm. So they're quite particular to each individual farm. The system is a self-managing system, but is subject to an annual audit, and you need to satisfy the auditor that you're meeting all the standards that are required. And if you do, then you continue on your merry way. If you're not, then you're required to address those shortfalls and you'll be audited again in the forthcoming year and to maintain those standards.
And there's nothing like a lockdown to keep the environment auditors away. Some great work going on to innovate and make sure that process is continued, which I know a certain ECAN councillor was very happy to hear.
Well, we contract for this year around 160, 170 FEP audits, and they're spread over the year, but we try not to conflict with high work times on the farms themselves. So we have a schedule that we try and adhere to, and as soon as we're no longer allowed to move around, that schedule comes under threat, and so we're falling behind. Now, one of our contractors, that's Lincoln Agritech, have been moving to try and use technology in their auditing, but have met with some resistance, I think mostly from the regulator, who wants to see it works before they're prepared to endorse it. So the COVID-19 has, if you like, a small silver lining by virtue of giving Lincoln Agritech the opportunity to demonstrate what they can do remotely. And so each farmer now uploads his farm environmental plan online. That's then looked at by the auditor, who then has a Zoom meeting with the farmer, and they go through the plan together, and the auditor will raise what questions need to be. The farmer can supply the information that's required. And then at a subsequent date, which suits both parties, they'll get out they'll actually go out to the site, and that's under level 3. They've been able to do this, and they fly a drone around the farm to carry out the visual part of the audit, and it's working really well. The resolution you get on these drone cameras now allows at least a good, not as good an observation of the conditions as you would if you were driving around yourself.
That's fantastic. So we haven't proceeded on with a multi-million-dollar irrigation scheme without environmental stewardship at the forefront of this. And one of the things to celebrate, of course, is the Selwyn Aquifer Recharge program and monitoring. How's that all been looking over this summer season?
Well, that's it's been. They've had a report through from the Selwyn Waihaura Zone Committee to the Environment Canterbury that they were extremely satisfied with the impact of what they take to be the lack of groundwater abstraction because of the irrigation scheme we have on the lowland streams. So the stream levels have risen, and some of the springs down in the lower catchment, which haven't flowed for many years, are now flowing very well.
So the insurance policy of irrigation is, of course, one thing with looming climate change, but CPW is an example so far that it can be done with the environmental improvements such as stream recharge, as well as, fish life. This is a great story. Do you think that why are the newspapers picking up on this?
I wouldn't care to suggest why, but we will continue to do a job which means that they can't ignore us.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark Pizey, and the great work of Central Plains Water Irrigation Scheme here in Canterbury as a bit of an update after a record harvest that was, of course, allowed to proceed with irrigation that has been supplied, and, of course, the flow-down effect of a community scheme such as CPW. So now we're talking about winter. I'd love some comments below. I want to know, what is your favourite winter food? Is it a party pumpkin soup, a good old roast merino? What is it? What is you don't want a nice glass of Pinot Noir? I'd love to know just some of those things that are so quintessential winter. And coming up after the break, we're going to stick to the theme of progressing environmental stewardship with our New Zealand food and fibre producers. As I caught up earlier today with Beef and Lamb New Zealand's Environmental Policy Manager to discuss how New Zealand is different from other countries in our greenhouse gas emissions. And so therefore, we need to ensure that science matches policy to support our farmers, to support the Zero Carbon Act.
This is Sarah's Country.
The Climate Change Commission has been asked to review New Zealand's greenhouse gas emission targets, and in particular biogenic methane emissions, with farmer groups urging it to make sure they are fair and appropriate. We are joined now on Sarah's Country by Environmental Policy Manager for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, Corina Jordan. Now, Corina, the Climate Change Minister James Shaw wants the Commission to consider whether New Zealand's commitment under the Paris Agreement goes far enough. What would you like to see them do here under this review?
Beef and Lamb welcomes Shaw's recommendations for the Climate Change Commission to have a look at our international targets and actually to review the zero carbon bill off the back of that. Obviously, at this stage, it's just to provide advice. Beef and Lamb's position is that we would like a formal review of the zero carbon bill targets, and in particular methane. We felt that the targets put forward in the zero carbon bill don't reflect the latest available science, and that they weren't really underpinned when they were established by a robust analysis of the implications of setting such stringent targets on New Zealand's economy, on our rural communities, and actually, in fact, whether or not they would move New Zealand forward in addressing climate change issues, and also create a platform that enables us to adapt to climate change, which is also very important in this space.
So the zero carbon bill had 24 to 47%. Below the target was for methane to be below 2017 levels by 2050. That's sort of quite a wide range. Is it narrow enough in terms of, and also how long will it take for our science to get to a point of understanding what a good target would be?
I think the science is evolving really quickly, and I mean that's why Beef and Lamb's pushing for a review, in particular of the methane targets. The organisation thinks that the science has moved on. I can talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. Beef and Lamb opposed that the wide range and the extent of those methane reduction targets, and actually our review of the science available when we submitted, which was last year, was that it could be a lot narrower than that, and the organisation actually sought a reduction target of 10%. And supported the long-lived gases coming to net zero by 2050, but thought that a less stringent methane target was appropriate given the New Zealand context, our international obligations, and our current scientific understanding about the role methane plays in warming. There has been latest research that's been undertaken by IPCC scientists, that's international scientists that study this stuff, that's their job, and they've said that essentially they've reviewed the emissions coefficients around methane of the latest available science. Ag Research domestically has also reviewed the warming potential in relation to methane, and they've requested some changes in relation to that. I'm just trying to get the numbers up in front of me, but essentially they're saying that the warming isn't as great as what it was originally set to be, and was essentially probably 30% less, so significantly less than what was originally set out by scientists and what the government based their decisions off.
How long ago did that come out, that they missed that target around how warm it was going to get?
That's just quite recent science, and the science is constantly evolving. I don't actually have a date. I can come back to you on that, but it's sort of over the last 6 months or so. So it's not just oxide emissions from livestock on hill country, are significantly less as well. And what we know for the sheep and beef sector, essentially since the 1990s, the sector's already reduced its emissions by about 30%, so already had significant gains in relation to reducing its greenhouse gas contributions.
Explain to me, just in regards to how it all works, where you've got a Climate Change Commission that's constantly reviewing new science, and as James Shaw has alluded to me in the past, that the Zero Carbon Act is a fluid moving document. How do you get changes to a fixed act on a regular, ongoing basis as science moves so quickly?
It is really tough. Beef and Lamb supports having clear and certain targets. It's just a matter of policy that these do evolve over time. Adaptive management is not a new thing. It's what we do. We just need to make sure that when we're setting legislation and we're setting targets, that we do so in a precautionary way, and we have clear processes for reviewing them. And under the Zero Carbon Act, there are clear processes. The Climate Change Commission has a role to review our budgets and our targets on a 5-yearly basis, and then provide advice back to the government based on the latest science, and a whole lot of stuff around the implications that targets have on New Zealand community and our wider wellbeing. And then the government considers that and will go through bill changes as required to update those targets. It is a bit cumbersome, but it is the process that we've got at the moment. What we're thinking is that they don't go too hard too fast, that they understand that science is evolving, and they do the analysis appropriately when they're setting policy in place. And our concern with that, these targets, when they were set, there wasn't that robust assessment across New Zealand's, I suppose, communities in relation to the impact this is going to have on our well-beings. And when I talk about well-beings, I talk about environmental well-beings, community well-beings, social well-beings, cultural well-beings, and economic well-being.
Yeah, exactly. And setting the policy is introducing the regulation around what tools we would need and levers we'll need to pull to meet those targets. And that's not being discussed much, rather than threats to just basically drop stock units effectively, and what other things are out there, and how that calculator of an on-farm business is going to be able to help contribute to this reduction.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, this organisation, or Beef and Lamb, is really worried that essentially the policy is setting a signal in relation to large-scale afforestation and to plantation forestry of the hill country in particular. Our concerns is that there's been no assessment of the implications that would have on rural communities, and no assessment across about the implications that would have in relation to providing for Indigenous biodiversity, for example, and sort of a healthy economy and a resilient economy. So we think that the policy really hasn't been designed in a way that it is careful about its implications, and it looks across dealing with cumulative social, economic and environmental issues. And we really think that the government needs to just take a moment, take a pause, and have a much more mature view about how they develop this policy and how it works in an integrated fashion to deliver on New Zealand's aspirations.
But Corina, we're going into an election. What an opportunity. I shouldn't be so smart.
Right? Yeah,
Corina,
exactly.
To finish, coming up to close the show, we're joined by Sir Peter Gluckman, the former New Zealand Chief Science Advisor, who's come out recently in Farmers Weekly saying we need to take advantage of this crisis and deal with these long-standing issues of land use, water, environment, soil quality once and for all. What's your message around, the opportunity for New Zealand to keep the foot down on our environmental achievements for the long-term prosperity of this country?
Oh, look, I fully believe we can have win-win situations. We can have a thriving community. We can have a healthy economy. We can have a diverse economy. We can really promote the well-being of the people within this country, and in a way that's sustainable for the long term. So I think this is an opportunity to it's not to stop. We need to keep going. That's for the benefit of all of us, for the agricultural sector and wider New Zealand. But we do need to just take a slight pause just to rethink about how all of these policies fit together and create something that we can be proud of, that's world leading, and that will provide for, across those world beings that I keep talking about. So develop them together, not in isolation or in silos, which is what we're currently seeing.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It's Corina Jordan, the Environmental Policy Manager for Beef and Lamb New Zealand. And tonight we're talking about what the things that you enjoy about winter, Corina. I mean, I know it probably doesn't feel like it in balmy Hawke's Bay, but what's your sort of favourite thing about winter?
Oh, jammies, big woolly ones, socks and a fire.
Yep, good Norsewear socks. Totally. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. That's Corina Jordan from Beef and Lamb.
This is Sarah's Country.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce higher quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Well, of course, we know the rural economy will be so much more important for many years to come, and collaborative solutions need to ensure that these long-standing issues we've been discussing for many years now to be more sustainable and environmentally focused need to be addressed. Is a top-down approach through policy the right answer, though? Farmers want systems that work for their land type and their business. So joining us tonight on Sarah's Country is Sir Peter Gluckman. He is a former Chief Science Advisor to the government, and now he's the chair of the International Network of Government Science Advice and President-elect, of course, of the International Science Council. Following his article in Farmers Weekly, thanks to Annette Scott this week, I was so privileged that Sir Peter wanted to join us on Sarah's Country, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight, Peter.
Happy to do so, yeah.
Have you got that cold blast come through where you are?
Oh, yeah, we're in Auckland, it's cold.
Yeah, and Aucklanders certainly do feel the cold. It's just a different cold, bit of a damp cold, I know, from living up there. Peter, what's your favourite thing about winter?
Oh, walking the beach at Piha when nobody else is on it, actually.
Yes. Oh, that's a fantastic thing to do. Absolutely. Now, Peter, let's get stuck into quite a few number of topics that you discuss with Annette in that Farmers Weekly article. I want to start by talking about farming systems that I just mentioned there before. Can you explain more about your thoughts on how we need to focus on arming farmers with this to make better business decisions with the environmental lens?
Well, I think the first thing is there's an opportunity after COVID to have a big rethink about how New Zealand does things. And I think that around the world there's a lot of thinking about the reset that will come given the recession, given that after every other major recession around the world there's been a reset. My own view is that reset has got to be holistic. So it's not a matter of just looking at the economics or looking at the social aspect, it's looking at the environmental. We have to look at that holistically. And that means fundamentally having a bottom-up approach where we have national conversations. We involve all the partners, all the stakeholders. You can't change any part of that system, any part of those systems without impact on other parts of the system. The reality is that New Zealand's left a lot of things undone for a long time. We haven't sorted out water. We haven't really sorted out land use issues. We haven't sorted out resource management issues. We've got confused regulations between national government and provincial government, regional government. We've got a lot of unmet issues. We're going to rely more and more on the primary sector to grow and be more productive at the same time that we want it to be more sustainable and environmental friendly. Clearly there's going to have to be diversification. Clearly there's going to be changes in farming systems over time for the simple reason that the changes in water distribution over the next 30 years due to climate change are dramatic. Because of all of that, we need to take the opportunity now to take a deep breath, talk to people, resolve what needs to be done collectively, and then get on with it. I mean, New Zealand is in a remarkably unique position. We can make a lot out of recovery into a better New Zealand, projecting to the world, and respecting that the landowners, the farmers, the food producing system can do a lot more for New Zealand. But we've got to be honest. We've got to make it sustainable. We should be thinking a lot more about something like Origin Green or something like the equivalent of that for New Zealand. Now that the most important thing in many ways will be to improve rural broadband so that data and precision methodologies can be used by farmers so much more than they can now. Farmers are good technology, use technology very well when it's to their benefit. And I think rural broadband, advanced rural high-speed broadband, sensors, data, new technologies like that, along with a more intelligent review of how land is used, water is used, and so forth, could lead to a new dawn for agriculture in New Zealand.
So you've talked there a lot about structure and how it's become very siloed, and the hopes were really pinned on this primary sector council of Damien O'Connor's Peter, do you believe that that is the sort of shining light to be able to muster everybody together around that common vision, as you said, in Origin Green?
Oh, look, I think it's broader than any one council. I think it needs national conversations. We're chairing a conversation at the moment through our research centre with most of the food producers, fed farmers, the research sector and agriculture, and they all say this is broader than government. It needs to be a collective, broader view. I think one of the things I've just mentioned there is critically important. We need our scientific research to be focused on where agriculture will be 10, 20 years from now, not just dealing with the very short-term gains where it's been pushed in recent years. So there's a lot to do. Farmers are key. Ultimately, they're the ones who know best what can happen on their land. Most of them know a lot about how they could improve their systems. It's a matter of working out how to help that happen and how to diversify high-valued primary production from both the land and whether it's farming, horticulture or aquaculture.
Do you believe the models are correct around our research institutes and our education systems in the primary sector to effectively take more funding and grow the industry for those 20-year science plans?
Look, I think one of the big resets that's needed is a reset around our higher education and science systems. They were right for the 1990s and perhaps for the 2000s, but as we move forward, we need to integrate and be more holistic. We have the incentives in our science system set very short term. They need to be set longer term because we all know, particularly in agriculture, it takes time to change the system, to develop it, to do the work. So I think that there's a need there. Clearly, farming, agriculture, horticulture, aquaculture are all very technologically based biological sciences. And we need to continue to think about how we upskill the next generation of farmers and primary producers. And on top of that, it's a remarkable, we can build alongside that environmental improvements. And so there's a lot of scope there for thinking about new ways of training young people or people who become sadly unemployed due to the crisis.
Mm-hmm. I want to go to genetic modification and gene editing, Peter. When we're talking about a national conversation, do you think that we've got to a point of maturity to have this, to actually put some plans in place with it that we can benefit from the science at the same time as keep our environmental focus?
Well, first of all, from a scientific point of view, the answer to that is yes. From the public policy point of view, we need to have the conversation so the public and the stakeholders can make decisions about it. Clearly it is the most important biological science, biological technology we have. We're using it heavily, for instance, in the battle against COVID. It's silly to go into the next 20 years with an important weapon with one hand tied behind our back and not access to something that's core to a modern biological economy. Now, how it's used is something that is up for the broader discussion. It's not for scientists to determine the answer to that question.
We heard there earlier from Beef and Lamb's Environmental Policy Manager Corina Jordan and talking around James Shaw wanting the Climate Change Commission to sort of go back to the drawing board and seeing if the science is lining up with our targets. You're a part of a very international network of government science advice. Peter, are we sort of positioned to how New Zealand's farming systems are made up very differently, and our emissions profile is to be able to be green, get like net zero production, and still be able to be productive to sell that story internationally?
Absolutely, but it will require several things to happen. It will require changes in land use. It will require changes in some farming systems. It will. When I say change in land use, to make the best use of the land in a way that's environmentally sustainable. It will require the use of technologies, both digital and life sciences, and it will require better and better farm practice. I mean, excuse me, all the farmers in New Zealand did as well as the best third of farmers in New Zealand did in terms of emissions profile, would be a lot further on. So there's a lot we can do, even with current knowledge. But we will use the new systems. The world needs food, but we must also produce that food in a way and label it as such. If we want high value from our food, we're going to have certified ways of labeling that it has a low carbon footprint.
I want to end on farmer well-being, because if your well-being's not right within yourself and your staff, then there is no environmental improvement or economic improvement to these business operations to then in turn pull the economy through. I have noticed a lot of this conversation about rural pulling the economy through. The sort of, well-being of farmers has changed to that feeling of being needed. And do you believe that a cohesion, a patriotism for New Zealand being a proud food producer will go a long way in pulling us together around this conversation?
Well, I think, first of all, farming has definitely shown a shift in its commitment to sustainability. And that's the first step. Secondly, New Zealand's woken up to the fact that farming is at the core of its economic backbone. That's true. Thirdly, by connecting farmers more, particularly through rural backbone, the high-speed fibre broadband, I think that farmers are not as isolated in the community as they used to be. There are many ways that farmers can be supported. I think that the most important thing is to be wanted. And I think there's been a period when farmers have not been wanted. Now they are wanted.
There's a lot more human psychology behind this next chapter that I think that we need to bring to the table. And as you said, this is about a holistic approach going forward. Thank you, Peter, so much for not only taking the time to join us tonight, but all the great work that you do for New Zealand on an international stage. And I look forward to talking to you in the near future.
So do I, Sarah. All the best, and to all the farmers, good luck.
Thank you so much. That's Sir Peter Gluckman there, former Chief Science Advisor to the National Government, and now sitting at an international level for science advice. That is all we've got time for tonight. If you're new to Serious Country and you haven't been able to catch any of the previous episodes, we have some outstanding guests, and I'm going to say that. I go with the methodology that to have the best show, you must have the best guests, and no one's off my radar. So if you'd like to suggest that we get certain guests on the show, please send me an email, sarah@periummedia.com, or slip into the inbox in any of my social medias. Of course, we're on podcast first thing in the morning on demand. So if you can't listen because, you've got stuck into, what's that show? Not Love is Blind, that stupid one that you watched, Joel. Too hot to handle. If you're watching Too Hot to Handle right now, and you can take us and listen to us on podcast in the morning, so search Serious Country and give us a big old subscribe on the podcast if you wouldn't mind too. That'd be quite handy. So good night and go well. And remember, New Zealand, we are on the path to be the world's most sustainable and regenerative food and farming fibre producers in the world. I know we're there, and things have changed. And if you've dug it through the tough times, where I believe that we will come into the good times. So good night and go well. And I'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m, right back here on Serious Country.
This is Serious Country.